RJ, was this the worst trade deadline of the salary cap era? It certainly felt like it was like the trade deadline with the least big, large, impactful, or as we're contractually obligated to say, as our friend Zane was saying at the deadline, if you are somebody in the media who covers hockey, you have to say move the needle. That's just part of what you have to sign to do the whole media gig. It just felt like there wasn't really any like big needle moving trade.
No, I'm with you, and I think there have been some more disappointing ones in the cap era. I certainly remember. I couldn't tell you exactly when, but the mid 2010s ones, there were a few where it was really hyped up as the deadline, and they had the whole TV show and everything that I used to watch on was NHL Network or wherever it was on TSN, and yeah, nothing happened. But this one's right up there. And it's the first one we've had in a few years that's felt this underwhelming. And I think the big answer is just you look at a lot of the big names that have been talked about as far as moving. I mean, that we talked about even a week ago, they didn't move. Whether it's Robert Thomas, Jordan Kyrou, Elias Pettersson, none of those guys ended up moving. And so we're kind of just left with the guys who really had to move. I mean, there were a few guys with term that went. It seemed like that was really a premium that teams placed value wise, but not a whole lot of names moving. There's still a lot of very interesting storylines with it,
Mhm.
especially with some of the deals that ended up not happening. Looking at you, Colton Parayko, and that whole situation. But yeah, definitely more underwhelming trade deadline.
Yeah, I think there's multiple factors, but yes, it's not at the height when, Paul Gostad was being moved for a first round pick because he could take some face offs and Nashville needed that, right? Like, and that being the big trade of the day. I forget which year that was exactly, but we've been through some underwhelming years for sure. We'll say you mentioned that, term was at a premium, really not a lot of movement on the rental market this year. And I saw that discussed after the fact. We talked about it the day of because just none of those guys were moving. I saw it being discussed after the fact, various people chiming in. And one of the common things that everybody's kind of come around to is the idea that, look, all these general managers know that the salary cap is going up. And so players with term where you know what that fixed number is going to be, and that number is just going to take up a smaller and smaller percentage of the cap moving forward, that has a premium attached to it, right? The salary cap's going to jump like $30 million in 3 years. If you can get somebody who's locked in on a 6.5, even a $7.5 million deal, that deal is just not going to feel like it's a big money contract another year from now. It already doesn't, right? 7.5, like there's a ton of those guys around. Um, but moving forward, it's just not going to have nearly as much weight. You're going to have so much more flexibility to build around that general managers are just trying to kind of plan for the future a little bit and try to find as many guys that they can get with that cost certainty now before, instead of saying going out grabbing a rental that you then maybe want to extend and have to pay a much larger contract to this offseason just because that cap is going to jump. The players, the agents are going to know that and they're going to be pushing for more money.
Right. And I think on the seller's side too, and this is something that Kraken GM Jason Bottrill talked about when we got the chance to do the media availability with him after the deadline, is that some teams who might have been considering selling some players, teams that might be out of it now that would be in the seller category, but feel that they can be competitive next season, don't necessarily want to get rid of some of their guys who are not rentals because they look around at the basically non-existent free agent market and they think, okay, if we're going to try and compete next season, who's going to be on the team here? Are we going to give up someone with term? How do we replace him, even if we don't necessarily need him right now?
Yeah, exactly. No, it's very true. I wonder about that with teams like St. Louis, where it feels like you probably need a longer rebuild, but you could always, I guess, try to run it back next year and see if you could sneak into the playoffs or something. Um, but yeah, it's going to be interesting. And yeah, I mean, this free agency class this upcoming year. Do you think trade deadline this year was disappointing? Wait for July 1st free agency this season because it's going to be rough, especially with another name being taken off the board. Nick Schmaltz re-signing with Utah. I believe, what was that, 8x8? I
Yeah, it
think.
was 8x8.
Yep. So I mean, was he just like he was the guy this year. It felt like free
Yeah, I mean,
agency was.
aside from of the forwards, basically it's just Alex Tuck that's left. He's kind of the only
Yeah.
potential impact forward left in this free agent class. I mean, you sort by points this year. First of all, it's a defenseman leading the free agent class, and Darren Radish. But then you got Alex Tuck, and then Alex Ovechkin, heck of a player, but not
Yeah.
not necessarily open to the whole league there as a traditional free agent. And then Charlie Coyle now.
Oh
So
my
that's kind of
gosh.
the drop off that you have.
It's
Anthony Mantha.
it's gonna be a brutal, brutal July 1st. That is for sure.
At what point do the networks, I mean, I guess they have to hype it up. Like they have no other option, but at what point do they kind of drop the pretense a little bit and maybe change the name from Free Agent Frenzy to just, I don't know, some free agents will be signed. I don't know.
They should just call it
Contract
trade
center.
deadline part 2, right? Like, cause
Yeah,
like I
there you
guarantee you
go.
the biggest news coming out that week is probably gonna be a trade, not a free agent signing.
That's true. Yeah, and there should be some big trades. Like I expect some big ones this offseason, especially with how few fireworks there were at the deadline. But yeah, the free agency is not going to be interesting.
Nope. All right, let's talk about some trades that have already happened though, and we'll talk about the big trades that did happen around this deadline. RJ, where are we starting?
Let's start in Colorado because this deal. I mean, well, first of all, we saw the result of this deal last night. We had the chance to watch the Avs play and beat up on the Seattle Kraken last night. We were at the game, and we both remarked that the McKinnon, Kadri, and Natchez line is just unfair for Colorado. And so, with this trade, the Avs get Nazem Kadri back from the Calgary Flames, and oh boy, is he fitting in really well already. And this trade came in super late. Like
Yeah.
the deadline had already passed. We were just sitting around, in the war room waiting for stuff going on. And this one just kind of comes out of nowhere. And fantastic deal for the Avs. Let's start with the Colorado side because first of all, you get to reunite with Nazem Kadri. He fits right in on your team. You know exactly what he can do. Won a Stanley Cup with you. As far as the return, you're not giving up that much for the
Nope.
player. You give up Victor Olofsson, Max Curran, a prospect, a first round draft pick in 2028, and a second round draft pick in 2027. And you get the Flames to retain 1.4 million of salary on Nazem Kadri, making him a $5.6 million player. Absolutely worth that amount of money. I know he's got some term left on the deal there. He is 35, he's getting older, but he's still got it.
Mhm.
And this is just a fantastic deal for Colorado. Absolutely love it. Home run. And they freed up some cap space. They did things like moving Sam Girard earlier. And I think a trade that, maybe wasn't the best value for that player there. You got Kulak back. He's a good, solid defensive defenseman, but you make moves like that so you can make a move like this.
Exactly. And with Nazem Kadri, not only is he just a great fit, he's essentially what they've been looking for since they lost him. Um, but you look at that contract and being able to get the number down to 5.6, and yes, there's going to be 3 years left on it after this one, and that's going to take him deep into his 30s. But at that 5.6 number again, with the salary cap jumping as much as it's going to continue to be jumping, I mean, as he ages and he starts falling down the lineup, yeah, that's maybe going to be a tad bit high for a depth center or somebody like that, but it's not going to feel, like an anchor hanging around your neck or anything the way that it would have a couple years ago, right? Like 5.6 to have Nazem Kadri at 37 be your 3C, you could deal with that, right? Like that's fine.
Absolutely.
You can still be a very competitive team, especially with how long you have Nathan McKinnon locked in for at 12.6, which again felt extremely rich just a little while ago. All of a sudden, doesn't feel as much so. Bunch of other players on this team locked in at reasonable numbers. Marty Necas locked in forever at 11.5. That extension hasn't even kicked in yet, but like that number feels really good now. All of a sudden. So I think this was a great ad for Colorado, and especially because of the versatility that it gives you right now, and really for not just this season but next season, based on who the Avs have signed through next year. Kadri, as we saw last night, pseudo center, pseudo wing playing with Nathan McKinnon and Marty Necas. Him and McKinnon were just kind of trading off responsibilities a lot of the night. I think as long as you can do that, that's going to be something that just makes, I mean, it did make that line kind of ridiculous, but you can afford to do that if you're Colorado. You got Brock Nelson to be your 2C. You bring in Nick Waugh, be your 3C. He looked good, right? Like you have depth. Both those guys signed past this season. So the ability to just kind of move a player like Nazem Kadri around, somebody who is as versatile as he is, can play on the wing, can play center, can play a more defensive role, can hang with superstar offensive guys and hang with them in the offensive zone. The ability just to kind of have him floating around your lineup and you just plug him in wherever there's an injury or wherever you need him to for the next couple years is going to make this Avs team just so difficult to match up against.
Yeah, and I mean the levels of depth at the forward group that they have now. I mean, it's basically what they've been searching for since that cup run that they had a few years ago, where they had to get rid of everybody. When the rising cap, I think, is going to let them get that back. Just the way that they can move this around, and I like their current configuration where they have Kadri with McKinnon and Natchez, because that line is just not fair. And you got Brock Nelson as your 2C and Waugh down the middle. But if they wanted to in the playoffs, I mean, if you're really just trying to go center deep, you could have McKinnon, Kadri, Nelson, and Waugh down the middle. No team can match that,
Nope.
as far as I'm concerned. Like, no team has that kind of depth at center 1 through 4. The other thing about that Kadri, McKinnon, Natchez line too is, like, all of them can play center, and
Yeah.
so they're all just floating around, moving around everywhere. It's awesome. Like, there's really very little positional, like, sticky kind of, where the guys just stay in one spot. It's so hard to defend against. And with that game against the Kraken too, we noticed the long cross ice pass in the offensive zone, resulting in a couple goals. And the first one, it was McKinnon to Natchez. The second one, it was Natchez to McKinnon, basically in each other's spots on the opposite side boards. Like, teams are going to have such a hard time defending against that.
They are. And you when you think about it, right, centers already have to play a lot of different spots in the offensive zone. They're used to kind of having to move around a lot like that. And this was actually something that just the previous evening you heard from the Seattle Torrent, PWHL team, because they made a lineup change and brought up Kayla Grant Mentis to play on their second line in the center spot, moved over their normal second line center, Darnell Sonakny. She moves over to the wing. They play together, had a lot of success together. And afterwards, both they talked about it, as well as head coach Steve O'Rourke, just talking about when you can have two centers out there together and their ability to kind of feed off of each other and think about things because they're used to kind of having to be in multiple different places at once a lot of time in the offensive zone. They just kind of can find, if they have chemistry, they can just kind of find each other and play off each other and really kind of create in the moment in a way that no other kind of pairings of hockey players kind of can. And it really felt like that watching the Avs, watching the three of them out there together. They were just able to play off of what the Kraken were doing. And like, obviously, yes, Nazem Kadri used to be with the Avs and everything, but he wasn't there when Marty Necas was there. And yet him and Necas looked like they had a ton of chemistry right away. And I think it's just because when you have played center, you get used to just seeing things from all those different angles, and you're able to then kind of map that out in your brain and find those gaps and know where those gaps are going to be and find your guy there and all of that kind of stuff. And it is just ridiculous to watch. Like, it was
Yeah.
ridiculous.
We had a lot of fun watching it, and it, again, wasn't the best game for the Kraken, for the home team, but we had a lot of fun watching it. Now, Dylan, you mentioned the contractually obligated term, move the needle. And I
Yes,
do think it applies here. So I was going to ask you, does this move, along with the Nick Waugh move and what the Avs did, does that move the needle for them? Because, don't need to remind you, they are in a very competitive division,
yep,
potentially top 3 teams in the entire league in the
I
Central
think so.
Division. You think it moves the needle for them?
I do. I think especially because of what we've already seen with him playing in the top six. And I certainly think like that move combined with the Nick Waugh move absolutely moves the needle, and really shores up Colorado, because it felt like Colorado, to be the definitive favorite in my mind, they needed another top six option. So and specifically somebody that could score or really accent Nathan McKinnon and Marty Necas, and Nazem Kadri can do that. Like he's absolutely going to do that. I think he helps with the depth of scoring in a big way. He's going to be able to provide space out there for those guys. And if defenses are going to absolutely commit to them, he is more than capable of making them pay for it. So I think that this moves the needle enough for me that I go, okay, I think Colorado, despite the fact that they're going to probably win the President's Trophy and have the curse and all of that, I think they are just definitively the best team in the league.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think this really does move the needle for them. And before this, if they hadn't made the Kadri deal, I would say it's basically a coin flip between them, Dallas, Minnesota. Like, of course, whichever team finishes first there is going to get out of the first round because they're just that much better. And then in the second round, who knows?
Mhm.
Because they're just so good, all three of these teams. I think Colorado is that much better than the other teams. Of course, we've seen upsets happen. Totally could in this division. Nothing would shock me, but Colorado is that much better after these trades. So I think they knocked this deadline out of the park. So from Colorado, who I think was a big player on the buyer's side, I want to go to the biggest player, I think, on the seller's side, which is the St. Louis Blues. And we can talk Calgary in this end of the Kadri deal. I think I was going to bundle it with the Mackenzie Weegar trade
That's
and
fine.
just talk about Calgary making their decisions to sell. But looking at St. Louis, and this was, I think, the most interesting team to look at going into the deadline. It's certainly where a lot of the insiders' eyes were on because there was talk about guys that moved, guys that didn't move. Robert Thomas, Jordan Kyrou, Colton Parayko, Jordan Binnington, and then you had Braden Schenn, Justin Faulk. They did move some of their guys and sell, but the Blues ultimately choosing to go the seller route, but not the tear it down route.
Mhm.
And I think at the end of the day, the Blues were, I think, on the seller side, the biggest winner of this trade deadline. And question for you, Dylan, because I know you theorized about this last week. You were wondering, was this an intentional strategy for the Blues to talk about your top players, put your biggest players on the market, set really, really high prices, stick to them, and when teams ultimately decided they couldn't match them, then be like, hey, well, okay, maybe you can't afford a Robert Thomas or Jordan Kyrou, but could I interest you in a Braden Schenn or a Justin Faulk? And you can get them to pay prices, or Colton Parayko, and you can get them to pay prices that are pretty high for those players, but comparatively low compared to your top players.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those that I think if we were to ask NHL general managers what really is the ultimate premium in those last couple days leading up to the trade deadline, and I have to imagine a lot of them would say time. And one of the things that I was just thinking about was, look, you know, if assuming you're on the phone and you're really having these conversations, which I know is still primarily how a lot of this is done, you can only talk to one other GM at a time. And if you're St. Louis and you float Jordan Kyrou out there and you float Robert Thomas out there, you've got them to pick up the phone and call you. Now you've got them. They're not talking to anybody else. They're talking to you, right? And you're taking up their time. And the more you keep talking to them and you try working out a Robert Thomas trade and you're sticking to your big high price and all of that kind of stuff, it just means that's less time for them to talk to anybody else. They're going to start feeling more and more pressure as the situation goes on. And maybe then they just have to make a deal with you. And I don't know definitively that that's what the Blues did here, but it sure feels like that's what the Blues did because it was all about Jordan Binnington. It was all about Robert Thomas, Jordan Kyrou. And then the next thing we know, they're just moving everybody else. And it's like, all right, I guess that's how this went down. But I think that ultimately the Blues handled this as well as they could. They moved the pieces for that they were definitely comfortable moving for really good prices, really good returns. And the pieces that have, I mean, we're talking like the most premium attached to them in Kyrou and Robert Thomas, and to a lesser extent Colton Parayko because of the term and the contracts that they're on. They were able to say, look, either pay us a ridiculously high price right now, or we'll revisit this in the offseason. And we'll still have a ton of leverage because these guys are locked in on these contracts because they have no trade clauses. Like all of the leverage that St. Louis would have had at this deadline, they still have in 2.5 months. it's all still there for them. They don't lose anything actually by not making a move around one of these guys at the trade deadline. So I think the Blues did the right thing. They set high prices for their guys. They were able to move the rest of them. They were able to have lots of conversations, at least plant seeds of what returns could look like for a trade in the offseason with lots of general managers. It just seems like a win-win-win all the way around for the St. Louis Blues.
Yeah, beautifully handled, I think. And I mean, I will start with the guys that didn't end up moving. I think they set a reasonably high price for Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou. I think they were looking for what sounded like with Thomas four like top 15 type, or at least three top 15 type assets coming back. And I think that's exactly what you should be looking at for a number one center who's, 85-point center in
26
the
years old.
NHL. 26 years old. Yeah, that's the kind of price you should be asking for if you're even thinking about moving him. A little harder to pin down what the price was on Jordan Kyrou, but clearly nobody was willing to meet it for that player. And then you have the interesting situation. I think Binnington, nobody traded for a goalie, so I just don't know how much demand was really there. But the interesting situation is Colton Parayko. And there's a few different angles of this. Of course, there's the fact that they didn't end up moving him, the fact that there was a trade agreed to and reported and ready to go that had a significant return, with Buffalo looking to trade Radim Murtka, and I think a pick there
and a first,
for Colton Parayko, and that is a massive return for that player. And of course, the situation where the trade details and all of that gets leaked by the media, gets put out there publicly before Colton Parayko has had the opportunity to decide whether he's going to waive his no trade clause or not. And this is trade protection he is entitled to. And he ultimately does decide to exercise that trade protection, and it nixes the deal. Which angle? I'm trying to think which angle should we go at first? Because I guess let's talk about quickly the I guess quote unquote strategy from the Blues in terms of, setting the prices high for the top players, because I think this is the ultimate example of it, where reportedly they were in talks with the Sabres about Robert Thomas, and that's probably the Sabres' real target. That should be the guy that they're really going after. He's the best player of the bunch. Not able to get it done. I guess they were asking for too much. Sounded like they wanted, Consta Hellenius, and they were looking at like some roster players as well. Like I
think Doan was one of the ones talked about as like the premium roster player going back.
Talked about as well. I mean, there were some very good players. It sounded like, where was the report that I saw? I don't know if I can pull it up fast enough, but it sounded like the deal breaker might have been Josh Norris also being involved in that deal, and that's taken up too much off your current roster potentially to do it. And so then maybe the Sabres pivot to Colton Parayko, which I don't even know if you call it a need for them, given how stacked their blue line already is. But man, he makes their blue line that much better. And the return, while I'm sure it's not the same price as Robert Thomas would have been, that is a really massive price for that player. And I'm sure the Blues are very much hoping that deal would go down and Parayko would waive his trade protection. That said, I know I'm not the first one to come out and say I don't like how this all went down, but it just does not feel fair to Colton Parayko that the way this was put out there before he had the chance to okay the trade, especially with a specific return out there as well. And as good as the return was, it puts him in a really awkward spot.
It puts him in a horrible spot because I'm sure there was a ton of St. Louis Blues fans that were really excited to see that return. Right? This is a team that they know they're out of it right now. They probably have to go through a rebuild. They do have to be selling off pieces. By the time this team is ready to be competitive again, Colton Parayko is not going to be the same player, right? Like he's 32 right now. And that is, especially considering a lot of the other deals done at this deadline, that would have easily been the best return anybody got from moving a player at the deadline. Right? You're talking about Murtka, who it was the 9th overall pick at this last year's draft, a big defenseman that has a lot of potential, and then a first round pick on top of it. That's a huge return that was going to get a lot of St. Louis Blues fans very excited about the future and about kickstarting potentially here a rebuild. That's going to take some time, and it's something that I know the Blues would have been really excited for, because that's something you could really use to help ease the blow of selling off and going and entering this rebuild. It gives you, something legitimate for fans to look forward to in the future and everything like that. And to have that out there, to have Parayko decide that he doesn't want to go to Buffalo, which totally fine. That's his right, as you said. It just puts him in a spot where Blues fans can just now be angry with him, can be upset with him, right? It's a horrible position for him to be in, um, because of that. And yeah, I don't know where, like, who leaked it and where it came out from. If that was, I mean, it would have been a really awful thing if it was on the St. Louis side of things and they were doing that to maybe pressure him into making that decision. Like, look, it's out there already. Do you really want to come back after this has happened, kind of thing? Um, but whoever leaked it and got it out there and got all that going, I mean, that is, it was not a good call.
No, it wasn't. And I mean, did you see in the aftermath where the Blues were talking about, Doug Armstrong was talking about checking all the staff members, going through their
Yeah.
their phones and their emails and such? That, I don't know. I'm not really buying that whole. And if anything, it makes it look a little bit more suspicious to me. Like, this had to have been leaked from the team side of things somewhere, and I don't know that it's just some random employee that you have somewhere where there was a leak or whatever. This feels like something that the Blues would have. Again, I don't have anything to back this, but like that they probably would have knowingly done. I don't know. It's just, it wouldn't surprise me from the team side of things. And so it really much, it felt like with Armstrong, especially making the point, like, look, we searched everybody and we, tried to find the leak or whatever. It felt like, we're all just trying to find out who did this.
Yeah.
It felt like the hot dog meme to me.
No, it's one of those things where it had to come from the St. Louis side of things. I don't know why Buffalo would leak this. It makes no sense for them
No.
to leak it. So it has to be on the St. Louis side of things. And given how many insiders ran with it and everything, that tells me it had to come from a credible source. Right? And I can't imagine that if it was a lower level employee who just tried to send a DM to Elliot Friedman, right? Or something like that, that an insider's going to pay them any attention, right? I'm sure they get people saying that they work for organizations all the time that are sending them bogus things like that. Like, we know that a lot of times with these insiders in any sport, it's all very deliberate. They have close relationships with the people highest up in the front office, and those are the people that they're talking to and that they're getting their information from. And again, don't know that to be the case for this, but that's typically how these things go down. And so it very much feels that way. I mean, does this mean we've been talking about like Kyrou and Thomas being moved in the offseason? Does this just mean that Parayko's probably moved in the offseason now?
I think so. I think that's probably, and again, he's put in such an awkward position where he's got to make a decision very quickly. There are also some reports, I don't know how reliable they are, that he would have been maybe willing to go to other destinations like, Anaheim or LA, somewhere in California. I think I saw, which, adds some credence, I guess, to the not enough palm trees in Buffalo comments. But I, I think, I think he's probably gonna look. The Blues have made it very clear they don't want him,
Right.
and it's hard to stay somewhere even when you are a franchise icon like he is, when you're not wanted, that they're trying to get rid of you, and when they've also put you in that spot.
Hmm.
Like, as a player, I'm thinking, yeah, they don't feel this sense of respect for me that I maybe assumed that they did before. And so, yeah, at that point I would be willing to move on.
Right. And I would do it in a way where I would really exercise that no trade clause to go somewhere I actually really want to go.
Yeah. And over the offseason, he'll have time to think about where he actually really wants to go,
Yeah.
instead of having it just thrust upon him in a situation like that where he's got maybe hours to make a decision.
Yeah. He's got the rest of this season to think about it. Like, St. Louis isn't going anywhere
Yeah.
playoff
Hey,
wise.
they've got some road trips, I'm sure, coming up.
Yep.
Maybe go around, look around some of the cities you go to, see what you think. He'll have that option. But I do feel bad for Colton Parayko just being kind of put in that situation. Thankfully, from the reaction I've seen, it sounds like I haven't seen really many fans or any fans, turning on him or getting mad with him. It seems like the ire is rightfully directed at the Blues organization rather than Parayko.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Anything else on St. Louis?
I'm just quickly looking at the two deals they actually did
Yeah,
get
yeah.
done.
So I guess we didn't even touch on the deals that they did.
Yeah, so we'll go over these fairly quickly, but this is where I think the strategy pays off because they were able to somehow, and again, I don't know if it's like related to the fact that they were shopping their top guys, but they were able to get teams to actually pay top of market prices for the players that they did decide to sell. And I think the biggest example of that is they do trade away their captain in Braden Schenn, and they get a lot for him. They get a first round pick, a third round pick, Jonathan Drouin to make the money work, and then a prospect goalie. But to get a first for a player that has 28 points for you, and I know he's a captain, I know he's got the leadership qualities, but he's 34 years old, so you don't think that the production's really coming back that much. That's a fantastic return. You look for you look at other players that are scoring more and went for less. This is a great deal for St. Louis.
It's a fantastic deal for St. Louis there around him. I mean, it sounds like they were in talks maybe with Kyrou to go there, right?
Yeah,
Like that was
it sounded like
that
it's
was
another bait
potentially
and switch,
something.
maybe.
And that the ask reportedly was Sean Aitchison, the prospect, the first round pick from this past draft that the Islanders had, and the Islanders were like, "No, we're not doing that." Which, if that is true, incredibly smart move from the Islanders. You are way too early in your window to be trading away top prospects like
Yes.
that for players that are more in their prime right now. But able to get this deal done, I do think the Islanders are sitting in a playoff spot right now, and you want to make the playoffs if you're them. Get Matthew Schaefer some playoff experience. Um, you're already trying to kind of rebrand yourself around the league, and for the current crop of players that are out there, you want to make yourself a destination. You want to get off of no trade lists and things like that as you kind of go through this rebuild. You want to have some positive momentum in the minds of everybody else, and I think that bringing in Schenn is going to do that for the Islanders. He'll help. It helps to have somebody like him go there and be willing to go there and everything. And then also, if you can make the playoffs, and we know what he can do come playoff time, if they're able to look competitive, it's something.
So you think so? Yeah, going back to the whole move the needle thing. You think he moves the needle for the Islanders?
I mean,
Because
yes,
I don't
because
know that he does.
because the needle was basically sitting, resting on the little thing that it rests at that keeps it from just hanging straight down, right? Like there was he's
It
not
makes the
moving the
needle jump
needle
just a little
not
bit.
a
It's
lot,
like you
yeah.
you jumped really hard and onto the ground, and it made the needle
Exactly.
kind of okay.
Yeah, whatever's housing the needle got shook around for a second there, and it wiggled some.
Okay. All right. I'll give you that. So I still think it overpay for the Islanders, but maybe it makes the needle, machine wiggle around a little bit. And then the other deal the Blues do is they send Justin Faulk to Detroit for Justin Hall to make the money work, a first round pick, a third round pick, and then a prospect in Dmitry Bachelnikov. Interesting prospect. Um, but get good price there for the defense. But I think this is closer to a fair price given Justin Falk probably had a lot of demand there in the market. Weak rental market for defensemen. Actually, not a
Not
rental because
even
he
a
has
rental,
1 year
yeah.
left too. So yeah, he's got a term, and that's going to be valuable. He is 33, so he's on the older side, but playing very very well. I think good ad for Detroit
Hmm.
as they're certainly looking to build up to try and make a playoff run. But they do get a solid price with a first, third, and a prospect. Like that's good value.
Yeah, I think it's a really solid return for the Blues. This was probably going to be the last year that you could get a first round pick for Justin Falk. And I think the term helps out on that. As great as he's been this year, and trust me, I've had him on fantasy all season. He's been great. But I think like this was the time to really maximize what you could get back from him. And yeah, the fit is really interesting. I mean, already 2 points in 3 games for Justin Falk in Detroit. They really needed another puck mover on the back end as they're trying to make their run, and they're fighting in that really competitive Atlantic division. They've kind of fallen out of the top 3 spots there, down into a wild card spot. They have Axel Sandin Pellikka. He's going to be great for them, and we've seen flashes of it this season, but he's not ready yet to be the puck mover for this team. And obviously Cider is to an extent. but they needed somebody back there that, could help run power plays, could move the puck, kind of keep positive momentum, um, and all of that good stuff. And Justin Falk's absolutely going to be able to do that. It does really feel though like, Detroit's paying a a good price for it because they feel like they really need to make the playoffs.
Yeah, no, I mean, certainly, I'm sure Steve Yzerman feels the pressure to get into the playoffs this year, and it might be a closer call than he thinks with Columbus there knocking
Mm,
at the door, 2 points back, a game in hand in that wild card race. Like they could actually miss, so I think they did feel like they needed to add, but I think they addressed the biggest immediate need, and they went after the player that I think fills that need the best. So like I like the trade for Detroit, and they get someone with a bit of term too. It's not just a pure rental based on this year. So I think this is a win-win for Detroit and
yeah,
St. Louis.
definitely.
So moving on from the Blues because I love what they did. Let's talk about let's go to the Mackenzie Weegar trade. And then we can kind of talk about Calgary, but we'll quickly talk about the Utah side of it because this one happened a little bit earlier. But the Utah Mammoth acquire Mackenzie Weegar. I talk about defenseman with term. Weegar's got a
Mhm.
lot more term. He's got 5 years left. In exchange for Oli Mata, get to make the money work, a prospect center, and 3 second-round picks. It's rare you see 3 second-round picks involved in one deal here, but I love this trade for Utah because the fit of player to team, it's hard to find anything better. And I know Mackenzie Weegar's had a down season with Calgary, but the way he plays as a defenseman, he loves to be involved in everything. He
Mhm.
is like all over both zones all the time. Just he does so much stuff. He's so active and just does everything. Sometimes it's risky, sometimes it doesn't work out, but he does everything all the time. And I think there is no better embodiment of that as a team than Utah. They all do everything all the time and they score a lot. They make some mistakes. It can be risky, but I just love the fit of player to team here.
Yeah, and I mean, talk about being all over the place. He could play both sides. There's literally nowhere out there on the ice that Mackenzie Weegar can't try to make something happen on. Right? That's what he wants to do. That's what this team wants to do. So I'm with you. It's a great fit. They needed help on the back end. Like that was the you know the area of the roster that needed the most support. I think they'll probably. I don't know. We'll see what they do in the offseason. It wouldn't shock me if they still tried to add something back there at some point. But I think he helps a lot when you just look at this blue line on paper, having another guy out there that can chew up as many minutes as Mackenzie Weegar can, and play, reasonably responsibly, which is something that this
Yeah,
team
yeah.
needs a lot of help kind of just getting up to. And on the other end of things, the contract is fantastic, right? Like he's locked in for not just this year, but then 4 additional years at 6.25, right? For like what the defensive market has already become and what it's going to continue to be. That's an incredible contract to have the cost certainty on, for the player that you can, feel reasonably comfortable is going to be solid for not just this year, but at least a couple more. And it's exactly what Utah needed, and they don't need those second round picks anymore, right? Like this is a team that is ready to try to take that next step now. They need to take that next step now. Those second round picks take like 3+ years before you start seeing anything out of them, if you assuming you hit on a player there. So I like that. I mean, they still have so many picks, it's ridiculous as I look at the Mammoths future out board. But yeah, this was a really solid trade for them. I love the fit, just like you said. It's great.
Yeah, and let's talk return because they avoid giving up
A
any of
first.
their top prospects or their firsts.
Yeah.
And I think that's huge for them because look, they already have so many fantastic prospects that you're not going to need the 3 seconds. You had too many picks. But I want to talk about the Calgary side because I think the Flames are one of the losers of this trade deadline. They trade away Mackenzie Weegar, they trade away Nezem Kadri, and those are moves that I think it's good to move those players because look, you need to tear this whole thing down. You need to go through the uncomfortable rebuild. That's what you have to do as Calgary. So I don't mind moving two guys who are on the wrong side of 30 even though they have some term, you get some flexibility moving out from under those contracts. But I don't think they were able to extract good value for
Mhm.
either of those two players, given the level of asset that they had available to them. And I think it was probably worse in this deal because you had so much term for Mackenzie Weegar and term was so valued at this deadline. And because you can't even get a first round pick, but you can't even get a really solid prospect from Utah. And Utah's got loads of them.
There's so
They've
many.
got prospects to spare. And with Uyghur, because he has so much term, you don't need to move him right now. Like you said with the Blues players, every bit of leverage that you have right now for a player like that is leverage you're still going to have in the offseason. If you're only going to get a collection of second round picks, if the best asset in this deal is going to be a second round pick, single asset, why are you making this move now?
Yeah, I don't understand it. Like the Kadri one kind of makes sense because he's 35, right? And
Yeah,
there is something to Colorado's
there's time
trying to make a
pressure.
run right now, and so there was a little bit more value there. But that was exactly what I thought with the Mackenzie Weegar thing on the Calgary side of things, which is you could have waited until the offseason and potentially gotten a better deal.
Yeah,
Like there
and
was like normally the reason to do a deal at the deadline with a player with term is because you're taking advantage of a team trying to go on a run, and therefore they're able to pay you a little bit more of a premium for that player. That obviously did not happen here. Like I have to assume you could have really, if you were shopping around the league, communicating with Uyghur, finding out which destinations he would be willing to trade his no trade clause to, and all of that kind of stuff. I have to assume you would have been able to be able to get a prospect back that was going to be greater than just the second round picks.
yeah, and as far as the second round picks too, I think teams are wising up and realizing that second round picks and lower are not worth as much as they had thought previously. Also, in the rising cap environment, to having actual solid players, it means that they're more valuable, and therefore, in terms of draft picks, they're worth more. In terms of draft
Yep.
picks. As far as the Flames' ability to even capitalize on these second rounders, I worry about that too because you look historically at Calgary. Dylan, do you know who the last second round pick the Flames took that actually like turned into a regular NHLer kind of? You know when
No,
that
I
was?
can't think of anybody that they've drafted in the second round like ever.
I got to go back to 2016, and it's Dylan Dubé, which, by the way, that has not aged well.
No.
But that's the last guy you can point to as any kind of a regular NHLer that they took in the second round. They have a few second rounders that are too early to tell, like Andrew Basha, Jacob Battaglia,
Yeah.
they could still be players, but they haven't played in the NHL yet. Going back, you have William Stromgren in 2021, who's played 3 games. Jan Kuznetsov in 2020, who's played 52 games, but he's not really an NHLer. And then to find anybody that's played 80 games, you go back to Dubé
Yeah.
in 2016, and the last second rounder they've had that was really knocked it out of the park. Great pick was the year prior, Rasmus Anderson.
Hmm.
But we're talking a decade here.
Yeah. No, I
You know,
mean, and some of that's on Calgary. Some of it is just the nature of second round picks, right? Like I said, if
yeah,
you're
you can't
Utah,
expect to hit on a lot
you
of them.
can't.
Yeah,
Yeah, the hit rate is a lot lower for the second round picks anyway, and certainly to find guys that are going to become, say, as good as Anderson was, right? Like that is a once in a decade kind of thing. So, um, yeah, I don't understand what Calgary was doing here. It felt like they could have potentially done more. Felt like if they had done a lot of these moves in the off season, like why weren't you? I know you almost made it last year, and you probably thought that maybe you could do that again this year. But like, you're telling me you couldn't have gotten better returns in really all the trades that Calgary has made this year if they'd made these trades in the off season before the season started?
yeah. I mean, Kadri is the one where I feel like there's
That's the
even
only
then.
one. But some
Even then,
people would have been
if you're
interested.
willing, yeah, and if you're willing to retain that money
Hmm.
on Kadri and make him a $5.6 million player, you don't think a $5.6 million Kadri could go for a first and a second in the offseason?
Right. He absolutely could have.
The
Like,
reason I'd make that deal still is because you're sending him to a place that he wants to go to, and that it's
yeah,
you're treating a player well, and
right.
I don't think you get that much more in the offseason. So like that's the deal I can excuse, but the Uyghur one I don't understand.
Yeah. No, it just rough go of it for the Flames, who are already having a rough go of it.
Yeah. No, they certainly are. They need to tear it all down and start from
I
scratch,
mean,
and it's going to be a long
yeah.
process. Um, it's something they've resisted for a while, but I think like Vancouver, they need to embrace that.
Yep.
Um, now let's go to let's do the John Carlson trade,
Hmm.
because I think this is, from a buyer's side, this is one of the best trades that we've seen. And I know John Carlson has yet to play a game for the Ducks because he's still recovering from an injury, but this was probably the biggest surprise to me of
Yeah.
trade deadline season, because this is a name that nobody was really talking about. There were a few people that that talked about, hey, I called this a week early, but none of the big insiders were really talking about John Carlson moving. Yeah, the Capitals trade their longtime franchise defenseman John Carlson, the Anaheim Ducks, for a first round pick and a third round pick. Now Carlson is in the last year of his deal, and I think you can see also the premium on term, or the discount for the lack of it here as a rental, where a defenseman like John Carlson, who he is 36, but he's still got it. He is
Yeah.
still playing upwards of 22 minutes a night. He is a first pairing defenseman. He's scoring at a little under a point per game rate. Like, he is a first pairing defenseman, legitimately still. Goes for a first and a third. I mean, that's pretty light in terms of
Yep.
return, but I think a lot of it is because he's a rental. But the Ducks don't care about that. They make a massive add to their blue line right now.
Yeah. No, this was a big move from them. It was interesting to see what the Ducks were going to do coming into this deadline because, going to be making the playoffs this year. Um, they're a young team, though, and it was kind of one of those similar to Utah, like, how much do we leverage future stuff for now? Like, how open and early are we in our window? All of that kind of conversation that could happen around these teams that are trying to, push for that first playoff run with the young core. And I feel like this is like the perfect move for them. Where like you are saying like, okay, this first round pick probably doesn't help us anytime soon, realistically, because it's going to be later in the first round than what we've been picking in. We have enough of a young core at this point. We're either going to sink or swim based on these guys that we already have. This first round pick's not going to move the needle that much for us. But you're going out there and you're addressing one of the things that legitimately I think could have used, which was a true number one guy on the back end for a playoff run, right? Like John Carlson being a leader in that room, because he will be instantly when he walks in there. That's just who he is as a player and as a person. And I think that this team could use that. And somebody who's legitimately going to be able to go out there and eat up 25 to 30 minutes come playoff time. This Ducks team didn't have somebody who could do that right now, or at least nobody that I would think that they would be comfortable letting do that, right? Like you don't want Jacob Trouba to be that guy for you. You don't want it to be, Racco Gudis, right? Not that he would ever play that much. Like you have Jackson Lacombe, but he's a young player and he's up more offensively focused. You need that anchor defenseman come playoff time if you want to try to get out of the first round and certainly go deeper than that. And John Carlson instantly becomes that guy for the Ducks.
Yeah, this is the Ducks addressing their biggest need. I look straight at Jacob Trouba here as I'm looking at the lineup. This is going to take a lot of ice time away from Jacob
Yep.
Trouba in the playoffs, and that is going to be a very good thing for Anaheim. I mean, this is just it's a home run trade, and it's the kind of trade you wouldn't think would be available, but they're able to make it work. I mean, I got to ask again. I'm going to be the move the needle guy. How much does this move the needle for the Ducks in a division that is as weak as we have maybe ever seen? The Ducks currently at the top of the division. If they're in the Pacific bracket, which it looks like they're going to be, I have a hard time seeing them not in the top three in the Pacific. How far can they go?
It's a good question because I feel like they have as much raw skill like up and down the roster now as anybody in that division, right? Like Vegas has some depth. Obviously, Edmonton has really good players, but more of a top heavy roster. I feel like this Anaheim team now definitively you can say has a lot of depth if they're healthy. They had the forward depth. This helps them with some depth on the back end, which is what they needed. I think he helps out their special teams. They're below average, both the power play and the PK. I think John Carlson being able to run a power play unit for you, probably second unit while Lacombe runs first. But hey, power play's not working, you could have John Carlson run your first unit. It's not like he's incapable of that. And then certainly again, helping out on the PK a lot is going to be huge. So I think a lot of the needle moving that this trade's going to do is not going to be in like the big normal ways that we talk about. It's going to be little things like special teams and leadership in the room, just being able to keep this team kind of even as the excitement for the playoffs builds. And then once you hit the postseason, being able to keep this group focused, I think he's going to help a lot with that in this room, because I don't know who else was really going to be the person to do that with this group.
Yeah, I mean, Radko Gudas is the captain. I don't know. I mean, certainly after he takes out Austin Matthews in their last game, I don't know that,
I think he has a hearing
and
right now.
Yeah, he's got a hearing right now. So I don't know that focus and discipline is really anything you can talk about with him. You're right. I think especially against Vegas and Edmonton, who are teams that they would be likely to see, they have that veteran leadership. They know how to turn it on when it matters. You're going to need to be able to counter some of that. So I love this trade for Anaheim. And then as far as the capital side of it, it's a really tough trade to have to make.
Yeah.
Because I mean, Alex Ovechkin talked about it afterward. He said this is the saddest day of his career, just personally, losing that teammate in John Carlson. And it's got to be just an absolute killer for morale in that room. But I think the Caps just realistically looked at where they are. They're not going to make the playoffs. And I think they took a long, hard look in the mirror, realized that, and figured you can get some assets that are going to help you in the future. And you know what? I wouldn't be surprised to see John Carlson just sign right back there in the summer.
Yeah.
And so if that happens, then boom, you get a first and a third essentially for free. And I think if the Caps want him back, they're going to be able to put together a persuasive, offer and to him. Because I think as much as, this trade really just sucks to make from a Capitals perspective, I think it could be smart, certainly if Carlson comes back.
Right. And even if he doesn't, I think it ends up working out okay for them. It's one of those tough personal things, and I know fans, it sucks losing him and everything, but we still don't know like what's going to happen with Ovi come this offseason.
I mean, that determines everything.
Like if Ovi leaves, then this is all, at least that era of players was kind of ending and over already. You can get some value back for John Carlson as a rental and keep the flexibility of bringing him back. That's just good business at the end of the day. And I think Caps fans kind of understand that too. And I think everybody around this team, both inside the organization and outside, is just waiting on the OV decision. Like everybody knows at this point, because they've been kind of out of the playoff picture for as long as they have now, that's the focus, and that's going to decide the future of this team and the organization right now. And so I think it's, like you said, it's a tough move. It's one you hate having to do, but I think it was the right call given everything else going on with the team.
Yeah. Now, quick aside, do you think the fact that they make this deal, does that indicate in any way that they maybe feel like Ovi might not be coming back?
No, I think they have to. I think if you're them, you have to plan for it no matter what. And this is, because like, even if Ovechkin comes back and he plays his age 41 season with you, that at some point he is going to stop playing, or he's no longer going to be playing in the National Hockey League for you. Right. And you have to at some point start dealing with that. And I think given the way this season has gone for them, it made sense to start that process now.
Yeah, I'm with you. And hey, if he does come back, then you go try and sign him as Carlson as a free agent. And because as long as he is on that team, as long as Ovechkin's on that team, you have a win now mandate and you have like a sentimentality mandate. Those are things you have to stick to as long as he is on that team. You can always pivot once you decide. So yeah, I have no issue with it.
And he was the one piece that you did. If Ovi leaves and this team has to start making some big changes, John Carlson was the one piece that had to be moved at this deadline because of the expiring contract, because of his age at 36 years old. All of the other pieces on this team that would have value in a trade, you can wait until the offseason and figure out what the direction of the organization is going to be before you make the call on, say, Jacob Chikrin or Dylan Strome or any of those guys.
Yeah, exactly. The time pressure with the rental is huge. Yep. So I probably should have done this before we went to Anaheim. I just needed to talk about that Carlson trade because it was so big. But we're going to go back to Alberta. I'm sorry.
Okay.
We're going to go back to Alberta and talk about the move the Edmonton Oilers made, where they acquire Jason Dickinson as a rental final year of his contract, and Colton Dock for Andrew Mangiapane, who goes the other way to make the money work to Chicago. They had already waived him, and then a first round pick. And this is, I'll ask you again, does this move the needle for an Edmonton Oilers team that is just struggling to find their footing at all? And an Oilers team that is so asset poor at this point. They had very little in terms of assets to give up. They already make the Tristan Jarry trade and give up some prime assets to do that. Now they give up a first in 2027 in order to get Jason Dickinson, who is, good defensive center, good
Hmm.
depth guy, can win faceoffs, can win you some matchups down the lineup, but he is a depth player. And he is, at least for now, a rental. Giving up, one of your rare premium assets to do this, how much does it move the needle for Edmonton?
It doesn't. It doesn't at all. This is a team that is going to have to live and die by their goaltending, right? Like that is what this entire season has proven. They have everything that you could ever wish for in McDavid and Draisaitl. You have offensive defenseman Evan Bouchard. You have some more depth forward options that can score. Zach Hyman, Ryan Nugent Hopkins. You have good depth guys beyond that up front, right? Like Jack Roslovic, and some others that you have up there. Adam Henrique, right? Even though I don't think he's looked that great this season. This doesn't move the needle at all because the needle is completely tied to whether or not you're getting saves. And I don't think, as good defensively as Jason Dickinson is, I don't think he's going to factor that much into whether or not you get just average goaltending, which is all you're searching for right now if you're Edmonton. Like this team absolutely makes a run through the Western Conference if they can just get average goaltending, and they just can't. They just can't. They have four goalies who have all started 13 or more games for them. The highest save percentage they have on the team is 892 from Connor Ingram. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, Jari, I'll throw this out here from Sportsnet stats. You have goalies minimum 10 games played, since his Oilers debut, December 13th, 855 save percentage, which is 58th out of 60 qualified goalies, 4.17 goals against average, 60th, last place out of 60 qualified goalies. He's been awful. And I think this is a fair question and one that's been asked a ton in Oilers circles and around the league, Dylan, but I'm curious your take real quick on this. Is it the goaltending or is it the defense? I know there's elements of both. There always is. But it's worth asking the question because we have seen lots of goalies fail for the Oilers this season. We've seen Stuart Skinner have success once he was traded away from them. Is it just that no goalie can have success playing behind this Oilers team? Or is it just that every goalie they brought in has been bad and has played poorly?
I think it is a defensive system that and the players that they have on the back end make it so that you either have to be a very, very good goaltender or you have to be a very specific kind of goaltender, right? Like you have to be kind of, just to pull the first name that comes to mind, Tim Thomas style goalie, where you thrive on the chaos, right? Where you live for having to move laterally in your crease to stop a guy who's just wide open back door, right? And there are goalies that do, for whatever reason, thrive in systems like that, right? They need the chaotic action in front of them, and even still, they're going to get very hot and very cold during that, but they just love all of that action happening in front of them. The problem is it's not many goaltenders that thrive in a situation like that and that enjoy that. It is certainly not something that goaltenders are taught and trained for as they're developing, right? Like it's just something that some guys end up developing and have. And I think that none of the guys that the Oilers have been going to are those kinds of guys. And so I think that that's been a problem for them. But again, that's not to take away from how horrible their defense is. Like it is legitimately terrible. And yes, we're talking about the goaltending, but so much of it is on the blue line. It's just that there's just so much that then needs to be fixed. And the conversation around that gets so big that I think it's just so much easier to default down to the goaltending.
Yeah, and I do think like look, I'd love to let the goaltending off the hook here, but I've watched a fair amount of Oilers games recently, and there are plenty of look, there's plenty of defensive breakdowns, but there's plenty of goals against for them that just make a save.
Right.
They just need to get a save, and they're makeable saves. And Tristan Jarry's not providing them. I mean, Connor Ingram's not providing them. It's funny you mentioned the Tim Thomas energy because I actually do think there is one goalie in the system they have that very much has it, and that's Calvin Pickard.
Yeah.
But the problem is he's just an AHL level goalie who
Right.
thrives. Who does have the Tim Thomas energy. He's just not very good. But yeah, they also just need to get a save from their goaltending, and it's amazing what that can do for a group defensively when you actually do start getting a save or two in those situations. They just haven't, and so they're playing with no confidence in the guy behind them.
It's certainly a problem that's feeding off of itself because the defense has no confidence in the goaltending. Goaltending has no confidence in the defense. And it's just created this death spiral for them. But it is one where, yes, to kind of, the defense has its problems, but the focus on the goaltending, even if the defense in front of you is that bad, you should be able to put up some then good advanced stats, right? Because then when you are making big saves, like those are like ridiculously high quality chances, and you should be able to put up some good advanced stats. And these goalies are not able to do that at all. They have a combined 27 quality starts in 66 games. That's not good. And that's just on them. Like they're not making easy saves, like you said, right? And the numbers back that up.
Yeah, and Jari specifically too. I mean, I don't know how much Oilers hockey you've watched recently.
I try not to
Just
watch a lot of it.
I don't blame you. I really don't blame you. He just looks so small in net. I don't know what it is. It's just maybe he's not being aggressive enough. Forget it. And maybe yeah, you with this Oilers defense, you can't get too aggressive. You got to feel like you're staying in your net enough. But he just looks so small in the net,
No,
smaller than he is.
he's so small and he's backed way up onto his line. And I think we could say this even from just watching like Philip Grubauer. Like that to me is just a confidence thing. Like whenever goalies start playing small and they start playing deep in their crease and all of that, it's just because they're just not confident. They're not feeling it, right? And again, I'm sure that the defense does nothing to inspire you to feel confident if you're in Edmonton, but I feel like that's also just one when goalies are really struggling internally. That's how they play, and it's again, it's just not how you have to play to be successful.
Yeah. He's the smallest looking 6'4" goalie I've seen. Just looking at him in the net. He is actually a big guy, believe it or not. But yeah, I'm with you though. Overall for the Oilers, like this trade doesn't move the needle because the only thing that can possibly move the needle for them is getting a save from their goaltenders. And this trade doesn't really address that. Um, I want to talk about deadline as a whole. Speaking of goaltenders, are you surprised we didn't see any goalies move? Because I look, I'm a little surprised by it. I know that generally goalie trades the deadline are rare, and there's a reason that they're rare because it's so difficult for a goalie to move to a new team and get used to everything. I think teams kind of learned with like the Ryan Miller trade many years
Mhm.
ago that goalie trades the deadline don't usually work. It's kind of like in football, like a quarterback where you rarely see them move midseason because there's just so much you have to learn and tendencies you have to get used to on a new team. That said, there are so many teams I think that should have been so desperate for for some help in net or at least just to roll the dice on somebody. I imagine the price wouldn't be very high for some of the goalies. And we heard lots of names for goalies out there, whether it was Jordan Binnington, Sergei Bobrovsky, even the goalie who's
Mhm.
won the last two Stanley Cups. His name was out there. I don't know how serious it ever was, but there were reportedly some goalies out there and goalies with good reputations in the playoffs or in clutch games, and none of them end up moving. I think the Oilers are a team that certainly could have taken a swing on somebody like that. It would have been tough to make it work cap wise, I think, for them.
Yeah.
But I think asset wise, it should have been doable. Vegas, who just hasn't been able to get a save all season, I thought they might be players for someone. The Sharks, just as like kind of a home run swing type of thing.
Yep.
Maybe if like Bobrovsky, heard them potentially mentioned. On the eastern side of thing, Montreal, I mean, Montembeau has been awful this season. You could probably use somebody else, to pair with like Dobesh, and you've got Fowler there still. Are you surprised to see a goalie not moved at the deadline?
No, only because of kind of everything that you said, that it's so hard to make work. Like the only way I would have seen it is if it was a goaltender with term that a team was planning to build around and focus more so on next year, right? Like
Mhm.
the idea of rental goalies these days just doesn't exist because it's a bad idea. Like
Yeah.
it
No,
doesn't
I mean,
exist
this
for a
year was proof
reason,
of it.
right? And I think this year proved that yeah, everybody NHL GMs are very slow to learn like lessons, but this feels like a lesson that they've learned is that it's a bad proposition to try to do it. I mean, the one other goalie that was kind of mentioned that would have been potentially movable, but obviously the price had to be perfect was Jesper Wallstead with
Mhm.
Minnesota, where like if they could have really moved him for a big difference maker up front for them, I think they would have. And that's the kind of goalie that you could see traded at a deadline because it's a young goaltender, a lot of team control left. So it's one of those where if you're the team that's bringing him in, you don't really care about the results the rest of this season. It's about moving forward with that player for years to come. Um, but obviously, the situation never really developed for Minnesota to make a move there. I understand why it would have to be a really good return if I was them to move him. But yeah, those are the kinds of levels of goaltending situation I feel like we need to see now to have goaltending trades that aren't like the Edmonton Pittsburgh Jarry Skinner trade where it's just legitimately you're trying to just get two guys to, you know, have a change of scenery.
Yeah, and I think too with the Wallstead thing, I'd barely even call that a goalie trade, just given the type of deal it would have to be. Like if Wallstead gets traded, we're not calling it the Jesper Wallstead trade. We're calling
Yes.
it, the Vincent Trocheck
Right.
trade or the Nazem Kadri trade or the Robert Thomas trade or whatever. That's what we're calling it. Yeah, I think that's a different kind of deal. And I know Binnington does have a year left on his contract after this one. Tough commitment to make 6 mil for a goalie that statistically has been the worst in the NHL this season
Yes.
over the regular season. So you are still like that. There is a risk at
It
play. It's not just like a risk free rental.
right, and anybody trading for him is trading for him for a playoff run. Like even though he's got the one extra year of term, that's not why you're bringing him in.
Yeah. And teams like Edmonton, Vegas, they've got longer term cap considerations to worry about. Montreal too a little bit, so it's a harder commitment to make. So I guess it all makes sense. I still think the league is maybe a little worse off for it because goalie trades are fun, especially like deadline goalie trades, even though they rarely work.
Yeah, I mean, if you could find out a way for guys to understand the habits of all 6 and 7 defensemen that are going to be playing in front of them in a month and a half before the playoffs start, like go for it. Then we'll see a lot more goalie trades.
Yeah, but until then, I think we've probably seen the end of it, unfortunately, because I just I would love to see a Sergei Bobrovsky just go in a rental situation to one of these teams and then show what he can do, but it was not to be.
Yep.
As far as further trades to go through, I mean, we got some more minor deals. The Sabres, pivoted. They didn't get Colton Parayko. They bring in Logan Stanley and Luke Schenn. Definitely don't pay as high of a price to do it. Um, Trading away Isaac Rosean, Jacob Bryson, a second and a fourth. I think still decently high price for those players. I think they were in a tough spot. They felt like they kind of had to make a deal to do something. I mean, I guess the ultimate question is how much do Logan Stanley and Luke Schenn move the needle for the Buffalo Sabres?
They don't move the needle. I otherwise like what Buffalo did at this deadline by like kind of largely staying pat because look, you don't have to make a move here. Like you're in a pretty good spot. You're winning a ton of games. You're pretty solidly in the playoff picture. You needed to be, and so much of your core is young and they're under team control, and you don't have to worry about anything. You did not have to go out there and make and force a big splash. You didn't have to be desperate if you were Buffalo. And I don't think this move was desperate, but it gets close, right? It's a big price to pay just to be like we did something and to send that message to the room that we believe in them, right? Because that's largely what this deal ends up feeling like because you're talking about guys that are going to be getting what 16 minutes a night for you, right? Like
Yeah, just about
your
given the blue
third
line you
pairing,
have. Yeah.
right? Like I don't know why you give up, the assets you give up to kind of reshape your third pairing. Like if you fail in the playoffs, it's not going to be because your third pairing. It's just
Yeah,
not
and
when you
in
have
their defense,
those
that's
guys
not
on the
what they
blue
were
line.
trying to do. Of
Right.
course, they were trying to go aim a little higher. I do think they were actually in a position where, like, okay, we have to do something because it's not it's a tough message to send to the team where it's like, okay, well, this trade didn't work out, so we're not going to do anything. And especially to the fans. And normally I would say that doesn't matter. Just do what's best for the team.
It
But
matters for these
the
fans.
Sabres, it matters to the Sabres fans for sure. So I'm fine with it. And hey, they're on fire. They're doing great.
Yep.
They I mean, I don't want to go fully on the aside here, but did you see the Sabres Lightning game the other day?
I did not, but I mean, I certainly saw all the reactions to it.
Over 100 penalty minutes. I mean, 8-7 final. Awesome game. I was lucky enough to catch the end of it live because I just saw someone post, "Hey, it's like 7-7. Tune in." Or no, it was 6. The Sabres hadn't tied it yet, or they hadn't taken the lead. It was 7-7. They scored to take the lead, 8-7 on the power play. But I just went and rewound the game and just watched the whole thing, even though I knew it was going to happen. Incredible. And the goal scoring didn't even really start till like the mid-second period either.
Yep.
There was just the game was like an hour and 15 minutes in, and it was like a 1-0, 1-1 game at the start of the second period because there were just so many fights. Like if I was watching it live, I was just like, okay, that's the story. This is going to be one of those true 1980s, 1990s style, just all out brawls the entire game type of games. And then you also get 15 goals to boot. It had everything.
Yeah, no, it seemed like a really good game. And it's one of those games too where it's like, okay, maybe we can believe a little bit in Buffalo because they win that one, right? Like they were able to go toe to toe with Tampa. Things deteriorated and they found a way to come out on top. And I think that that's important for them. And really, that's what they've been doing since the Olympic break. Is you look at the 8 wins, they're 8-1 since the Olympic break, and of those 8 wins that they have, 5 of them have been 1-goal games. Like I think that that's a sign of improvement of this young group taking a step forward, that they're finding themselves on the right side of that. Now, we'll find out come playoff time how much of this is just luck and you're just like ending up on the right side of those games. You're the team getting the one bounce or whatever that's needed to come out on the right side of it, versus how much of this is them legitimately turning a corner and being able to play that way and find ways to win, whether it's an 8-7 victory or a 2-1 victory. You just find the way to win based on the opponent you're playing and the vibes in the air that night.
Yeah. And I mean, I still think, you look at just goal differential as a whole on the season, they're still tied for 5th in the NHL. So it's not just, winning a bunch of 1-goal games that goes your way. They are, they are winning games convincingly elsewhere. I don't know. The fact that they also ended Tampa's home winning streak too, not in that game, but an earlier game, like they are beating some of the top teams, especially the ones in their division who they might have to go through. They're just looking more and more legit.
It feels real.
Day.
It feels real.
And especially as wide open as the East feels.
Yeah.
This season, like it's an exciting time to be a Buffalo Sabres fan for the first time in forever. Also, just in that game too against Lightning, just seeing how happy the fans looked.
Yeah.
And just you get to enjoy that game, which I think probably top. I don't know. I'd have to. We could make a list in the summer. I was like top 10 regular season game in the salary cap era for the NHL. I think it really did have everything. But like seeing how much fun the fans were having, so happy for them. They absolutely deserve it.
Yeah. All right. We're, hour 15 in. We've talked about a lot. Is there anything else trade wise? Because the other stories are some of the teams that were sellers that we could talk about, right? Like Toronto, Florida, that kind of thing, which we could talk about now or we could talk about later in a future episode, because those storylines are not going to be going away anytime soon. But anything else that you wanted to really make sure we get in today?
Yeah, well, I think with Florida, they sold a little bit. They weren't full on sellers in a way that they could have been. Like they didn't move Bobrovsky. I think
they explored it though.
They explored it, and I think a lot of the guys that they could move, probably the value wasn't there and it wasn't worth it to them. And so, they're going to basically stand pat and hold. The Leafs, it's tough because like they didn't even have a whole lot they could move. I think they would be, willing to move guys. They moved Bobby McMahon, didn't
Scott
get that
Laughton.
Much for him. Scott Laughton,
Nick Waugh.
So, they Nick Waugh, that's true. And so you are able to recoup some value there. I mean, you get a third for Scott Laughton. You do get a first for Nick Waugh, so good on you for that. But I mean, the Leafs are just a larger conversation, a much bigger mess than the trade deadline, really tells you. They've got just so many issues, and we'll see on Austin Matthews' health too after taking a nasty hit to the knee.
Yeah, I mean, what does it say where also, um, just looking at these two teams, I know one of the things that certainly Leafs fans have focused on when talking about their front office, you look at both these teams not having the seasons that they wanted to, both making the decision basically at the Olympic break that, hey, look, it's probably not going to happen for us this year for whatever reason, right? And trying to adjust for that accordingly. And so you're going to have Florida, who normally would not have a first round pick, but if they end up in the top 10, they will have their own first round pick. So I think they're kind of gunning for that. And there's been reports about that. But then you have Toronto, who also doesn't have their own first round pick, but I believe it's only top 5 protected.
Yeah.
And given the way that the East has just been better than the Western Conference, right? Toronto, it's going to be very hard to find yourself in the top 5 if you're Toronto, because you're definitely going to be out of the playoff picture. You're going to be one of the worst teams in the Eastern Conference. Right now, they're the 3rd worst team in the Eastern Conference, but they're still like just halfway down the league standings if you just look at the league based on points, because the Western Conference and particularly the Pacific Division have been so bad that it's just you can't even get like high draft position out of it.
Yeah, actually, I think that's a really underrated storyline with that pick, because for the Leafs, can you get, and it's not even really into the bottom 5 in the league. It's really bottom 4, kind of, to feel safe about it. Because even if you are the 5th worst team and you have the 5th best lottery odds, more than 50% chance you're drafting not in the top 5, just based on the lottery
Mm-hmm.
work, how the lottery works. Someone might jump you. And so really to have a solid chance, and even then it's like an 80 79% chance of being in the top 5 if you have the 4th highest lottery odds. So I mean, the Leafs are doing the best that they possibly can, I think, right now at tanking. Although actually they did just beat the Ducks, so that's a problem. But I think they were pretty angry after the Austin Matthews thing. Like, that was a team that, even though they didn't jump in, and no one jumped into his defense right away, which I
Yeah.
mean, that speaks to larger problems and systemic issues with them. But I think they did make the Ducks pay on the scoreboard. They've got a ways to go, and it's going to be hard for them. And I
Yes.
think, like, more than anybody, like, they need to sink in the standings. They absolutely need it. Also, just
But
from a
again,
fan
it's not going to
perspective,
help them, right? Like this pick does, they're not even going to have the pick out of it.
right?
They can fall
That's
all
the
the way
thing.
down and pick 7th. It doesn't matter because Boston's going to be making that pick.
Well, and the fact that it goes to Boston,
And I know that's the thing. It's
the
Tyler
fact that it
Sagan all
goes to
over again.
Boston, perhaps your biggest rival, all over again, also because of course the Tyler Sagan pick with the Phil Kessel trade, like, they've seen this already. I, it's they're maximizing the trauma to their fans here in a way that only the Leafs can do.
Yep. No, it's there's gonna have to be changes there next year. I don't see how there isn't, based on how this year has gone and because of things like this. And I know Brad
Yeah,
Treliving was asked about the top 5 protection on this versus top 10 protection, which is far more standard, the top 10
yeah,
protection. And all he could say was that's what it took to get the deal done last year at the deadline for Brandon Carlo, because that's where this pick is coming from. Brandon Carlo, who has struggled, we'll say, with the Leafs this year.
yeah. I mean, that's going to go down as one of the all-time worst trades potentially. Certainly, if this is
Yeah.
pick 6 or 7 or something that goes to Boston, and then they're not able to get it in the top 5, we're looking at an all-time bad trade there too. And Fraser Minton turning out to be a great player for them as well.
Yeah.
Just disastrous trade. But like the Leafs, it's going to be really interesting coming down to the end of the season. Like, can they get that? Can they get to like the top 4 lottery odds? It's going to be huge for them. And it's a big rooting interest for Boston too. Like, if you're a Bruins fan, like, you got to be following that very closely. That's the difference
Yeah.
between you getting like, a top 6 or 7 pick and potentially versus not. Like, that's one of the bigger things that could happen to you or not this season. I know you're gonna, you might make the playoffs and all that, but like, that's another huge thing to be rooting for.
Right. Right now, Toronto 7th. That's where they're sitting. So it'd be really interesting. Anyway, that was like my last big thing that I just wanted
Have
to
you
get
heard
in
people
there.
talking about that? I haven't heard people talking about
Oh,
that.
in Leafs Nation, they
Okay,
are
okay,
talking about that. Trust me.
okay.
But yeah, it's been weird to me that it hasn't been talked about elsewhere. Like, why is that not one of the national storylines around this team? Is that, you know, that the Leafs could have their worst finish in a long time and potentially not even have the pick to show for it.
Yeah.
Like any
And I
team
think
that finds themselves in that spot, it's a horrible place to be.
right. Maybe it's Toronto news fatigue a little bit,
Yeah.
but yeah, if any team was in that spot,
Or
then
again, it's one where it can be a last week of the season type story.
yes, sir, as it gets close, because then you're because it could come down to like the last game, the last week. It probably will,
Yeah.
and so then it becomes a really interesting story. So I think it's one that maybe they're Leafs fans and us maybe are just a little early on this one. So
Yeah. But 5-point cushion to get down to
yeah.
where they'd need to be to have that pick be safe. So we'll see what ends up happening with them. You, anything else before we sign off?
No, I mean, as I'm looking at the first round here, I guess the Ottawa Senators got a first round pick back,
Yeah.
not necessarily their first round pick back, but they got it back. So good on them. I like on Tankathon how it has the top teams and it says it separates them: end of lottery, conference final losers, Stanley Cup final teams, and then punished teams. At the end, it just has Ottawa.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what we see the league do now, right? Like they don't like to completely take away the pick. They did for the Coyotes a couple of years ago, 2021. They lost their pick. But they do if there's enough time before that pick has to be made that was, taken away from you, you generally get it back. It's just going to be at the end of the round.
Yeah. So good on Ottawa getting a pick back, I suppose. And then yeah, I mean, I guess
Do you want to
one quick
describe the situation around why they didn't have the pick, just for anybody who doesn't know?
yeah. So this was related to the Evgeny Dodonov trade.
Which
Back when was
was
that?
2022. Like I completely
2022.
forgot basically about this whole situation until this whole thing came up.
Right. And so where I was it so the Senators didn't properly check which teams were on Dodonov's no trade list. They traded him to one of those teams anyway. And so they were punished for that. As they should be. You gotta, that's can't happen.
Yeah, it was that they failed to disclose that he had a no trade list
Oh, that's what it
when
was.
they
Yeah.
traded him to
Okay. It was so
Vegas.
long ago. I'm failing to remember the
Yeah,
details
because
here.
then Vegas went to move him, and he was like, "Well, I have trade protection," and they're like, "What are you talking about?"
That's right. That's right.
And it was negotiated trade protection that he was due, that the Senators did not tell Vegas about, so Vegas did not know that he had a 10-team no trade list. But again, like, yeah, this goes back so long. But yes, they were forced to forfeit a first round pick in either 24, 25, or 26. They kept punting that decision because, quite frankly, they had high draft picks. It made sense to do so, and ultimately they were able to not have to forfeit a pick at all. Although their pick this year will be the last one of the first round. And yeah, so it seems like the ownership change kind of helped with that. It's kind of like a new regime. The league didn't want to be like, hey, new owners, you paid a ton of money for this organization, you got to pay for the sins of the last group.
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty consistent with how the league operates there.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I guess one quick PSA: we talked so much about the trades and the trade deadline. Just for newer fans, I'm sure a lot of you listening are going to know this already, but I'm sure a lot won't. The trade deadline in the NHL is not an actual deadline
Yeah.
on trades. You can make trades after the deadline. We've seen a couple trades after the deadline. So if you're looking and see teams reporting a trade, you're like, wait, what is this? The deadline's passed. You can still make trades. It's just the players who are traded in any deals like that are not eligible for the Stanley Cup playoffs. And so usually you'll see teams make trades around minor league players or guys or teams that are sometimes teams that are both of them very clearly not in playoff position or something like that. So it is rare. You won't usually see a trade of note after that, but you will see some minor trades, and that's what's going on.
Yep, definitely. So, all right, I think that's going to do it for this episode of Red Glare. Thanks so much, everybody, and we'll see you all next time.